This doesn't look like Illbleed. Michael Reynolds Horrorland Illbleed. Invitation card. Dear Kirk Almighty. Lost it. Well, they promised money, and I do like money. So the game's afoot.
Began to crawl.
Illbleed was a greatly misunderstood title during the time of its release. Reviewers weren't exactly receptive of its eccentric design, outlandish humor, or the many unique choices it posed. Let's read some choice quotes to understand where they were coming from. Jerky controls and lame graphics. Because its core play mechanics start to wear on you after even a few hours of playing. Anything beyond a quick look makes little sense. John Crazy says, 10 out of 10, it's the best. Ultima EXE, cool game. Very scared and interest. One of the best games on DC, must buy. Ever since it released, Illbleed has been one very polarizing game. And those reactions are often typical of games that present something different from the norm, or products just too ahead of their time. And I don't fully blame the journalists or the people who just didn't get it for not grasping all the brilliance at play here, as you have to come to the table with a strong sense of humor and adapt to a few janky control decisions before you can really let the appreciation set in. Personally, I see Illbleed as the swan song of the Dreamcast era, and boy, what an interesting note to close things on. Now, before we get into the game, I want to give you a little background on how this game came to be. Hot off the heels of an unexpected smash hit, Blue Stinger, Shinya Nishigaki and CLIMAX Graphics entered production on Illbleed with a standing deal in place for Sega to handle the publishing rights of the game and to fund the sequel to Blue Stinger 2 just after. Confident in this new momentum and holding a desire to differentiate themselves from CLIMAX Entertainment, Shinya changed CLIMAX Graphics to Crazy Games. and things were looking up for Shinya and company. But as you know, fate sometimes has other plans. So then came a terrible series of events that befell both Sega and Nishigaki that led to Illbleed only selling 1/10 of the amount of copies as its predecessor Blue Stinger, despite it being in many regards a better overall experience. The Dreamcast was out of production at that point, and people were trading in their shit for a PS2, or a logical person would likely place the blame on Sega themselves for backing out of the publishing deal for Illbleed, then forcing Nishigaki to seek help from an American subsidiary of Jalico, Amusement Interface Associate, or AIA for short, which was a small studio operating out of Chicago that only had about $100,000 worth of operating capital. So I imagine they didn't have too much in the way of a marketing budget. And the final nail in this game's coffin was omitting a European release entirely. This is one of the few games that did not make it over to European shores, even though it's totally weird and bizarre, and Europeans love weird and bizarre shit.
You'll vomit with excitement. You'll puke with pleasure. You'll shit with fear.
So let's get into it. Illbleed introduces us to our protagonist, Eriko Christie, a purple-haired, big-titty goth girl played by Lainey Manila. Eriko recounts the traumatic events of her childhood during a high school speech contest, which is given to an audience of fellow teenagers that are unusually respectful during this macabre story. But I think Eriko's a shoo-in, given her impressive ventriloquism delivery.
My dad was always conjuring up new devices, tricks, and traps, each one scarier than the last.
You may have noticed that she doesn't open her mouth, and while that may cause some problems for her down the line in various facets, this was a financial choice that Crazy Games made, learning their lessons from Blue Stinger, where the lip syncing never matched up or resembled anything close to human speech patterns.
That was close. Thanks for helping me. My name is Elliot G. Ballad.
Where's Tim?
Well, who are you?
Dogs.
In the speech, we learn that Eriko's father was an architect for haunted houses and would test out his spooky traps on a young Eriko. These traumatic events resulted in Eriko's mom divorcing him and taking Eriko away from him. Eriko became shaped by her father's traps, as they implanted an innate love for all things horror. So much so that she even formed her own horror club. Let's meet the rest of the cast. Eriko meets up with their friends, Average Man Kevin, marking a return for Ryan Drummond, Brock lookalike Randy, the best character in the game, and the clairvoyant Michelle, also voiced by Lainey.
What, Michelle? Why didn't you listen to Eriko's speech?
I don't need to. I know she'll win. Here, take a look at this.
Those are guest invitations to Illbleed. How'd you get them?
From a Pepco promotion.
Kill! Look, we can win $100 million there.
Yeah, if we can manage to get through the whole park, that is.
No sweat.
Our overconfident bunch decide to rush over to Illbleed immediately, whilst the sole holdout, Eriko, thinks this contest is too good to be true and heads home. Days pass, and Eriko's friends are nowhere to be found. So our unlikely heroine makes her way over to Illbleed, and man, she's in for one hell of a weird time.
Excuse me, did you see 3 high school kids around here 3 days ago? They had special invites. What?
So Eriko is dropped into a hub world of various theme park attractions. The hub world helps set the stage for a very unique dark comedy, and there are very few games that go for this angle. Let's take a little tour. Here you have Bloody Mary's item shop that sells one of the oddest assortments of recovery items ever featured in a video game that all come with an extremely steep price tag. You'll visit this place a lot to load up on recovery items before entering an attraction. Although you should always keep an even amount of supplies on hand, just keep in mind you can't carry over recovery items between attractions, so you either use them or lose them. And don't waste all of your money here tuck a little away. You'll be glad you did. Then there's the Dummy Man's photo booth where you can save your game. Hands down, this is my favorite room. I just love the attention to detail for this tiny little room. Look at this giant dummy man. All this for a basic save room. Then there's the bank, which you'll probably never visit, but you can rescue characters you might have missed during the level. Ultimately, it's never worth the price to resurrect them, and most players will never utilize this feature. Then there's the ER, which may be the most interesting bit of the hub world. Here, you can get operations to recover your health or other statuses, or you can undergo surgery to upgrade various attributes of your characters. That is, if you have enough money and artificial organs on hand to cram into your character's body. The upgrades are very expensive, but necessary to keep up with the scaling difficulty. Last, but certainly not least, is the tutorial graveyard, and many first-timers might miss this since it's tucked away behind the ER, but it's essential to go through it to understand the odd nuances of Illbleed's gameplay. The tutorial graveyard will give you a general overview to the game and provide you with a couple of bonus healing items for your trouble. However, the graveyard does not explain all the mechanics like combat or how to use key items, so there still remains a bit of a learning curve to overcome. So let's get to the good stuff now. The attractions. There are 6 total levels to complete, followed by Michael Reynolds' Museum. Each level is presented as an interactive horror movie, and you're the star. You get a story crawl that lays down the bizarre exposition of what lies ahead, then they throw up a snazzy title card, and then lay out a set of goals that give you a total prize pot at the end of the level, should you fulfill the conditions. I'm going to focus a little more attention to the first level, the Home Run of Death, because it helps set the stage for the rest of Illbleed. Then I'll point out some brief highlights to each subsequent level. In general, if you don't like this level, then Illbleed just isn't the game for you. But if you do, you're in for one hell of a treat, because they just get better. Right after you're dropped into Hotel Bandbellow, you walk a few steps and then I know it seems like a dick move to put an unavoidable trap at the beginning of the first level, but this is the developers warning you to slow down and take your time, because if you rush forward through these levels without any hesitation, you are going to die. You see this bar up here? These are your senses, and Illbleed requires the player to make use of all of their senses to predict the locations of harmful traps and either avoid them or deactivate them. Now, some traps are constant, so every time you play the game, they will be in the same spot, but other traps are random, so you can't entirely rely on your memory. Now, the first goal to each level should be to seek out the horror monitor, which is a device that allows you to mark where you think the trap will be, using your senses as a hint. But this comes at the expense of a bit of adrenaline, this brain juice over here. You have a limited amount of juice, so you have to do your best to use your senses to make educated guesses. Now, if you're correct, not only do you avoid the trap, but you get some adrenaline as a reward. However, if you guess incorrectly, you waste the adrenaline. Some people see this as a sophisticated game of Minesweeper, but I like to think of it as a reverse Tecmo's Deception. Now, if you run out of juice or you forget to mark a trap, you risk activating the trap, which is a bittersweet event, as the traps are often hilarious to witness, but they cause damage, bleeding, or your heart rate to rise, which may result in a shock death. You'll most likely activate the majority of these traps by accident your first time through, so just enjoy the ride. Everyone dies their first time. On top of traps, you'll run into monsters occasionally. Now, I've heard complaints with the battle system being too wonky and unresponsive. It's a survival horror game, of course that's true, but I think the decriers are missing the point. The bad fighting engine is an integral quality to maintain that authentic B-movie feel about Illbleed. It's a feature, but overall fighting is a futile affair unless you have a weapon on hand. In most cases, you're better off just running away. To do that, you hop on this helicopter pad and wave your arms frantically until a rope ladder descends to carry you to safety. Because of course, my biggest piece of advice is to learn the dodge button. It provides you with a lot lot of invincibility frames and gives you a prime opportunity to strike back. If you're ever surrounded by a group of enemies, it's best to divide and conquer, or just hang back and let them duke it out with each other while you stay out of the way. In summation, you'll have a better time if you just run when you can and fight when you have to. Now, as far as exploration is concerned, veteran survival horror players would know that you should always take each room as having a potential threat behind the door. So make sure you're dipping into your inventory and patching yourself up if you're hurting, because you never know what lies ahead. Pay attention to your sixth sense on your meter. It detects either an item or an enemy on the field. The items you find in the levels are extremely important because they give your character certain perks that you might not otherwise have. You can find recovery items, character upgrades for surgery, or other useful items like this torso that'll enhance their defense. If you don't know what's what, just go into your inventory and there's a brief description on what that item does. I'm not gonna get into all of them. Just take your time, go slowly, and eventually you'll stumble upon a dummy man photo booth where you can save your game. I like what they did with the music here. The photo booth plays a soothing tune that provides the player with a brief respite from all the bloody chaos that they just went through. Crazy Games does a lot of effective things with the music in this one, but more on that in a bit. The home run of death is by far the most difficult level in the game. Yes, the very first level. This is mostly due to the player being expected to learn the game mechanics immediately or die trying. This level throws so many curveballs at you, both literally and figuratively. And I totally understand if many players just walk away and give up out of frustration. Not only do you have to learn to utilize all of your senses, but you're also thrown into a couple of spooky mazes where the invulnerable boss of the level, Banbello, chases you down with a makeshift flamethrower. There are very few moments to relax during the last stretch of the level. At the end of the mazes comes a showdown with Banbello where you have to beat him to a pulp with a baseball bat, and you better do it quickly because Kevin's life is on the line. Now, if you made it through the level without wasting too much time, then you'll rescue Kevin, who will become a playable character in the next level. If you're too slow, then he dies, which will give you a money penalty at the end of the stage, as well as qualifying you for one of the hidden endings. So just when you think the level is over, comes the biggest fucking casual filter I've ever seen, period. Giant Banbello. It was at this point where I first gave up on Illbleed as a kid. Where did this even come from? This is one of the most terrifyingly brutal last stretches to a first level that I've ever seen. So Giant Banbello rips apart this house that used to be connected to the exit to the stage, leaving behind a trail of logs that you have to traverse while simultaneously dodging Banbello's karate chops. Understandably, you'll be in a panic because what could have prepared you for this? He will murder you in a short amount of time, so you have to master the dodge button and platforming, which both really haven't been expected of the player up until this point. By the way, they lock the recovery menu so there's no healing. You've got one shot to get this right. So you're hopping along and then there's a fork in the logs. Which way do you go? Well, if you go right, you get to the exit of the stage. But the problem is, it's locked by a gate that has a card reader on it, and you don't have the card. So you've got to hop all the way back, dodging Banbello yet again. But if you choose to go up, it leads to a little shack that reveals two major twists that instantly changed my entire opinion on Illbleed forever. Number one, Banbello is an animatronic exoskeleton controlled by this guy.
You're looking at 2 meters of thick titanium for every bone. All computer controlled by me. How'd you like that, big sucker, eh?
Number two, Eriko is now a cold-blooded murderer. Oh wait, it's just a meaty robot, so never mind. Now that Banbello is deactivated, the player can breathe a major sigh of relief as they hop their way to the exit. Now I don't know how intentional it was in the design of this level, but just giving the player a few minutes of silent hopping on logs to process all the crazy shit that just went down left a lasting impression on me. I knew that I was in for something special. I know, this seems like a very aggravating introduction to a game, but Illbleed is the kind of parent that believes pressure makes diamonds when it comes to teaching the player the essentials. If you can make it through this level, then you're prepared to beat the game. When you're back at the hub world, this is a good time to get upgrade surgery before the next level. Now each character has certain advantages that are true to their character. Eriko naturally has the most adrenaline due to growing up around traps. Kevin is just an average dude, so he has an average set of points in all areas. Michelle is basically a second Eriko, ironic because she's played by the same voice actress. And Randy is a super strong meathead, so he lacks brains. Allow me to elaborate further on that point in a minute. From this point on, you'll come to understand that each level makes some interesting twists on the Illbleed formula, changing up key aspects to keep you on your toes. So here's a brief overview of the levels and my thoughts on them. Level 2, The Revenge of the Queen Worm. The entire stage is inspired by the movie Tremors, so what's not to love? From the start, a monkey steals your horror monitor and then peeps at your naked body, so you have to play the entire level without it. It makes things go by faster without all the traps. The catch is, you have to abide by Tremors' rules. Don't touch the ground or giant worms will eat you. The plot involves this ghost farmer that's in love with his pet worm, and I'm still not sure if it's a sexual thing or not, but either way, I'm pretty invested. There's a clever bit of platforming where you have to navigate the level by hopping on these fake movie billboards to avoid the dirt. The billboards are clever parodies of real movies, and I love them. You have the option of saving Michelle from a group of monkeys here, but be warned, this battle is one of the toughest in the game, so just let them attack each other and then clean up the leftovers. You end up building a flamethrower at the end to take down the giant worm, and the ending is just beyond words.
Grandpa! Rachel! I've missed you so. You appear to be okay. Oh, that's a relief. At last, we can be together forever. Let's go back to hell.
This is a solid fucking level, I loved it. Then comes the third level, the Wood Puppets, which is by far tied with the sixth level for one of the oddest ever conceived. You're in a haunted lumber mill that's loaded with these creepy wood puppets, one of which is your friend Randy. He's being pursued by these evil lumberjacks and a giant sentient tree in a survival of the fittest hunting competition. The only way you can rescue him is to become a wood puppet yourself. So you drop into this machine that replaces your skin with wood. As a wood puppet, you can't jump, but you can do these wacky kicks and spinning arm attacks. Then comes the part where you must make the most amazing moral choice I've ever seen in a game. Do you give Randy his brain back, which will restore him to his former self, or not, which makes Randy mentally retarded for the entire rest of the game? This choice affects nothing else in the story. Randy will be an invalid and have almost no adrenaline. He just runs around drooling, moaning, and slumped over like he's slightly aware of his condition. It's depressing as hell, but also endearing?
Dad!
You must be one of those part-timers.
Video games are art. Okay. Then you fight a barfing tree at the end of this level. Stage 4, which happens to be my least favorite, is the killer department store. Here, they reward you with money from the start of the stage, but the twist is, the traps can then steal that money from you. There's just too much going on in this stage. It feels like 3 crammed into 1. But there are some interesting things, like a talking cake that wants a severed head for a topping.
Complete at last.
Then you can eat the cake after that if you want. Then there's a steakhouse where you're greeted by a parody of Chef from South Park.
Hello there.
Who wants you to fight all the meat that you currently have in your pockets that you found in the meat department that you didn't give to 2 talking cockroaches? Go on. Check it out. Look who got his own video game.
It's my dog, Dogs. He's in the game. Dogs Bauer. Challenge another story? Challenge or another story? I don't even know what it says. But that's my boy Dogs on the Mega Dream. Excited to see him.
Then comes the worst part of the stage. There's a toy shop where a killer doll is chasing you down, and then on the next map, you have to play hide and seek with it to chase it down. Then finally, you're forced to face off against her in a jump roping competition, where if you miss a jump, you get hit by the rope, which causes you to bleed all over the place. I hate this part of the game. You'll notice that there's a slight delay between when you press the jump button and when Eriko decides to jump. You have to make 10 successful jumps to proceed. There's no getting around it. This part sucks. But if you're persistent enough, you'll get used to the wonkiness after a few tries. Thankfully, the stage boss kind of makes up for this bit. You face off against the reincarnation of the store owner, Donald Cashman, who's a giant metal spider with a human face. If he didn't look tough enough, he also has an infinite health bar. Of course, there's a gimmick to beat him. Just like Banbello, he's being controlled by a team of Illbleed employees. So all you gotta do is snatch the controller away from them and then ram his dumb ass into the wall a few times until he explodes. I know it's not a true boss fight, but it's a satisfying conclusion to a very long stage. The 5th level is called Killer Man, and the premise is by far the most intriguing. The theme here is a whodunit murder mystery that centers around all the behind-the-scenes portions of Illbleed. It has a total cabin-in-the-woods vibe about it, which really drew me in. You get a close glimpse on how all the traps and monsters are created for the theme part. From a design standpoint, the level isn't as memorable as the one that follows, but I find it to be the most disturbing level contained within Illbleed. You see, before the levels felt like elaborate haunted houses with jump scare jokes played for laughs. Here we get a better picture of what happens to all the people who don't make it to the end of Illbleed. There's piles and piles of corpses, ghosts flying around, and a real murderer on the loose. These bastards even have enough balls to kill off Dogs Bauer in this level. What the hell? Anyways, this is the kind of level that provokes more questions than answers, but I'm glad it was included to give another dimension to the wackiness of Illbleed.
Try and use your clues to solve who the murderer is. If you come up with the right killer, you'll get a game cash bonus after clearing this stage.
The 6th stage, and the final one, and by far the most infamous of them all, is called Toy Hunter Court Goes to Hell. Now, if you've made it this far into the game, you probably already love it. But this is the level that put Illbleed in my top spot as my favorite Dreamcast game, as well as in my top 5 video games of all time. Because of the sheer audacity the developers had when they created this level level. You take on the role of Woody from Toy Story. Oh, never mind, he has a goatee. Totally original character. You're on a quest to save your girlfriend, the floating-butted sexy doll, whose owner was a sick kid that died, and she's buried with him, which sends her to toy hell.
No!
Quark is willing to do whatever it takes to save her. But there's two problems here. One, Quark is a good toy, so he's not gonna go to hell. And two, he doesn't know any sick kids. But he's not one to give up. Let's do it.
Oh, what?
So Quark shoots a couple of hookers in the streets of his town, then ends up at the egg bar where he gets faded on some milk. And in his drunken stupor, he catches the attention of talking police cars.
Lock him up for 500 years. No, he shall get a death penalty. I hear ya! I hear ya! Yeah, kill the bum and send him to hell. Roger that.
And then he gets arrested and sent to Alcatoy's prison, where he runs into Buzz, this rocket that talks like Sylvester Stallone.
I thought it was a goner for sure. Thank you. You must have received a death sentence to have ended up here.
I think I understand what they were going for here. Was this a joke pun on the word rocket? Like rocket, Rocky? Anyways, the rocket tells him that the toy Bible said that if you get executed, you get a free ticket to hell. Just look at Quark's reaction to this great news.
You mean I can rendezvous with Sexy Doll if they hang me?
Yep, that's the deal.
Yeehaw! Yeehaw!
Now, for some unknown reason, the rocket saves Quark from his execution, which then elicits my favorite line in the game.
What was that for? I wanted to die.
Quark runs into the rocket, who then explains why he saved Quark's life. There's one thing he forgot to mention. If you want to make it to toy hell, you have to be buried with a child. The problem is, dead kids are hard to come by. And Quark doesn't have any time to wait around because Sexy Doll's been kidnapped. So Quark and the rocket speed things up a little bit by playing God and shooting a kid. This is how you get shit done.
Jeremy, what happened? Jeremy!
This shit is legendary. Illbleed creates boundaries just to break them. Anything goes. Anything. Because now, if you didn't think a child murder was enough to get Sega to drop publishing rights for this game, this next scene takes the boldest step so far into the realm of self-destruction for a game developer that I've ever seen. It's revealed that Sexy Doll had been kidnapped by a demon named Zodic. Come on, the balls on Nishigaki. You kill Sonic the Hedgehog in a Dreamcast game. The one thing you're not supposed to do. My jaw dropped when I got to this part for the first time. Not only because of the realization that I'm playing a game made by a sheer madman that had zero fucks to give, but for the fact that you had to shoot the rings to kill Zodic. Sega did not like Zodic. Maybe Mr. Naka hates me. Where's Nishigaki's Lifetime Achievement Award? Where is it? The final section of Illbleed takes place in Michael Reynolds' museum, the mysterious owner of Illbleed. But before you can claim your $100 million reward, you have to choose from 3 different boss battles. There's Oh No Man, which is a headless guy with scythes, who's the easiest of the 3 to fight. There's the Bull Stinger, which was a common enemy in Blue Stinger, and it's one of the harder fights to pick from. And then there's a real fight with Donald Cashman. You get the same outcome your first time through, because when you beat them, the prize money is yours.
I'm a man of my word. Here, I present you $100 million.
However, Illbleed is one of those games that carries on the tradition of post-game content. So if you want to go for the true ending, there's a little bit more you have to do. In a nutshell, you have to play through the game again, only letting all of your friends die, which also removes an article of Eriko's clothing. She doesn't get fully naked and there's no titty to show, but I'm not complaining. Now, besides Eriko's birthday suit, a couple other revelations take place in the museum this time around.
Dad!
Eriko?
I truly have no words for any of this shit, but I'm just happy it's there. The major difference here is that instead of fighting one of the 3 boss fights, you then have to solve a puzzle in the museum, and if you get it right, it reveals Michael Reynolds' true form. And then there's 2 additional boss fights. I just see it as one of the greatest ways to close out your video game, and to end your video game company on one of the highest fucking notes possible, and by virtue, the Sega Dreamcast itself, rest in peace. To close things out here, I could accuse Illbleed of being a disjointed mess of colors that leans too heavily on copious amounts of blood, its twisted sense of humor, and mostly half-baked idea levels, but why bother criticizing a game that didn't attempt to be anything more than what it advertised? Illbleed displays its imperfections with pride and a high degree of self-awareness. Whether you like Illbleed or not, you'll have to admit, it's an experience beyond compare. What you find here, you will not find anywhere else. No one would be so bold in the modern era. It's safe to say that Illbleed carries with it the inescapable aroma of death, because a couple of years after its release, its creator Shinya Nishigaki passed away suddenly of a heart attack, and with him went the potential of any more crazy games. Now, speaking from the heart, I get sad every time I play Illbleed because I know something like this just can't happen anymore. It's a product of its era, and it was born from the mind of a genius. This and Blue Stinger, while rough around the edges, capture everything that I look for in a video game. I hope that with my video, in some way or another, I've inspired you to play this, at least once, to share my love of Illbleed and my love of laughter. Thanks for watching, and happy Halloween.
It's crazy for it.
Disgusting.